Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the Shaarey Zedek Yazidi Rescue Initiative. I just wanted to begin with a few words. You know that the book of Genesis begins with the story of creation. A perfect world, a Gan Eden, in which mankind has only one responsibility, and that is not to eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Of course, human nature being what it is, once we were warned, we were definitely going to eat from that tree. The serpent is really just an excuse. So Adam and Eve ate, and God knew immediately. Still, God asks this question, where are you? It's a question addressed not only to Adam and Eve, however many thousands of years ago. It's actually addressed to every human being in all times and places, including today. And so the question is, where are we today? Similarly, after Cain kills Abel in a fit of jealous rage, God knows all about it. Still, he puts the question, where is your brother Abel? And Cain famously answers, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Once again, the question as well as the answer echo throughout the generations. Today, are we our brother's keeper? I'm happy to say this afternoon that we can answer both questions positively. Where are we today? Last month, in a unanimous decision, the board of Congregation Shaarey Zedek voted to extend a helping hand to 2 Yazidi families, and they'll be settling in Winnipeg sometime in the next few months. But who are the Yazidis, and why should they be of concern to us? Just very briefly, the Yazidis are a Kurdish-speaking people living mostly in northern Iraq. They practice a religion which combines elements of Gnostic Christianity, Judaism, Sufi Islam, and Zoroastrianism. And much of their tradition is oral. Historically, the Yazidis have endured a destiny that shares much in common with us Jews. Down through the centuries, Yazidis have suffered over 70 massacres. At their peak, they numbered some 23 million. Today, there are approximately 700,000 souls. They've been hunted, they've been hated, they've been humiliated, and they've been murdered for more than 7 centuries. Consistent with this sad history, the Yazidis are paying the heaviest price for the ambitions of the Islamic State. Once in the hands of ISIS, few Yazidis are able to escape. Those who do flee face death from starvation or dehydration. Those who do stay face rape and murder. For children, it's abduction, forced conversion, and sexual slavery. Today, there are thousands of Yazidis in refugee camps in Syria, Kurdistan, and Turkey, and their situation is dire. Humanitarian aid is scarce, and Yazidis are reporting attacks and mistreatment within these camps by those who've hated them for generations. Yazidi refugees in Turkey, registered with the UN High Commission for Refugees, face a 7-year waiting list just to be interviewed. In the meantime, a combination of harsh weather, difficult living conditions, and constant threats to life amount to nothing short of genocide. 75 years ago, the world didn't care what happened to the Jews of Europe. 70 years ago, in the aftermath of the Shoah, we solemnly declared, never again. Sadly, since that time, several more genocides have occurred, all with little protest or intervention from the international community. Let's not now repeat the sin of standing idly by the blood of our neighbor. The reality of a Yazidi genocide is too compelling, too much like our own experience 2 generations ago, for us to do nothing. Now is a time for humanitarian compassion. Now is a time when God is implicitly asking, where is our brother Abel? Let's now answer Cain's question, am I my brother's keeper, with a resounding yes. And there's another question raised by Hillel many centuries ago that also sounds through the centuries. If not now, then when? Certainly when it comes to saving a life, the time is always right now. May our combined efforts meet with success in giving these Yazidi families a new chance at life, in the democratic human rights paradise of Canada, the place we're fortunate to call home. I'd now like to invite Anita Neville to come to the podium.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was wonderful. I think what I would, well, first of all, let me begin by thanking everybody for coming out this afternoon. It's a wonderful turnout, and it's a cold afternoon, and we're just delighted to see so many people here. What I'd like to do is just explain a little bit about the format of the afternoon. I want to tell you that Shaarey Zedek got involved. The board approved in principle. Can you not hear me? Oh, okay. Shaarey Zedek got involved. There was a motion in principle supporting our congregation sponsoring a Syrian family or two. And then Michelle Aziza came to see us and told us about the initiative of Operation Ezra and the effort to assist the Yazidi family, and we were in as part of a larger community initiative. I want to today acknowledge the initiative of the Winnipeg Friends of Israel, who took the initiative with the Yazidi community in sponsoring and raising the awareness of our congregation and of our community of the plight of the Yazidis. And there have been many people who have been involved, and I'm loath to identify some, but I do want to thank Robert at the back of the room, because this afternoon would not have happened without Robert Didit and the efforts that he put in so many ways in the afternoon. The format of the afternoon, I will be facilitating it for the early part of the afternoon, and then Lauren will take over. We're working as a bit of a tag team, and it seems to be working okay, so we'll continue. But what we will do, we will hear first from Michelle Aziza, who will explain a little bit about Operation Ezra and the role of the Shaarey Zedek within the context of Operation Ezra. And then we will hear from Nafia Nasa, a young Yazidi woman living in Winnipeg, whose family is here in Winnipeg, and she will speak to her experience both in the camps as a refugee and in coming to Winnipeg. We will then follow that with a short 7-minute video, and following that, Al Benarosh will explain the role of Jewish Child and Family Service and the Federation. There'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. If we don't have the answers, and we may not, because we're all into something new and don't have all the answers, but if we don't have the answers to your questions today, we will try and find them and get back to you individually on that basis. So right now I'd like to invite Michelle Aziza, who's become the spokesperson and really the driving force behind Operation Ezra. Michelle has been responsible for submitting all of the applications to the Department of, I think it's called Immigration, and Citizen Immigration and Refugees. I should know it, but I don't. And he has been the lead in doing a lot of the paperwork and grunt work, and we are all quite indebted to him. Michelle.
Hi, good afternoon. I am going to take 5 to 10 minutes and take you through the history of Operation Ezra and give you some of the background. Before I do that, I wanted to, and maybe I'm going to repeat some of what Rabbi Green already mentioned, but I think it's important to understand a few facts about the Yazidi people as we go through the presentation and as we watch the video and listen to Nafia's presentation as well. And I've jotted down a few of the points that I think are very, very relevant to keep in mind. The Yazidi people, as Rabbi Green mentioned, are a religious minority that come from northern Iraq in the region of Kurdistan. It's a religion that may be as old as 5,000 years old, very, very old. As Rabbi Green mentioned, today the world population is down to 700,000 Yazidis from 23 million some 700 years ago. Yazidis are now scattered, starting to get scattered around the world. In Iraq, there are still about 500,000 Yazidis scattered, but mostly in the northern part of Iraq and Kurdistan. There's about 100,000 Yazidis in refugee camps in Syria and in Turkey, United Nations camps, segregated camps for Yazidi only. Europe has about 100,000 Yazidis, mostly in Germany, some of Eastern Europe, and that number is changing because a lot of the refugees now are arriving on the coast of Europe, as I'm sure you've seen on TV and read in the news. North America has about 1,000 Yazidis. There's about 500 in the States, in Nebraska. And Canada has about 500, maybe 450 Yazidis. London, Ontario has about 250. Winnipeg happens to be, we used to call it the Yazidi capital of Canada. There's about 200 Yazidi members in the city of Winnipeg. As Rabbi Green mentioned, the Yazidi people continue to be in danger of extermination in Iraq, in Syria, and even in some of the refugee camps where they are today. They're certainly not safe anywhere they're living today. Persecution by ISIS, persecution by other local groups. ISIS is just the issue today. Before ISIS, Yazidis were persecuted, and again, for hundreds of years. The last point on this slide is maybe the most important one, and maybe the one that got a number of us involved in this project. And that is that the Yazidi people are a persecuted religious minority. They're a victim of a genocide. Finally, the United Nations has recognized it. They're without a homeland, and they're seeking refuge somewhere in the world. And again, as Rabbi Green mentioned, maybe this is a very familiar picture that we're painting. And it's mostly for that reason that a number of us, and I'll talk about this now, but a number of us decided to get involved and do something about the situation. The next two slides will just take you through the Operation Ezra, just get you up to speed with where we are today. Operation Ezra is a project that was launched back in April of 2015, so only 10 months ago by an Israel advocacy group, Winnipeg Friends of Israel. At the time, Winnipeg Friends of Israel invited Nafia to speak, and Nafia came to a home and spoke to a group of 20 people or so, and really touched each and every one of those people. We walked away from that meeting feeling that we had maybe a responsibility to get engaged, and maybe even an obligation to do something and help. And so at the time, back in April, Winnipeg Friends of Israel decided to set up two simple objectives. The first one was to raise awareness of the plight of the Yazidis. Very little was known and very little is known today about what goes on and what is happening to that group of people. And the second one was to try to help with the sponsorship of up to 2 families. And that was our goal. And we were looking to maybe start fundraising and looking to raise about $60,000 to help sponsor 2 families. We got more and more people involved. Between April and August of 2015, we through Winnipeg Friends of Israel, the Manitoba Multi-Faith Council, and the Yazidi community in Manitoba, we decided to engage more parties and more people, partners. We brought in the Mennonite Central Committee, and they're today very involved in Operation Ezra. They're the, what's called a sponsorship agreement holder. For anyone to be able to sponsor a family, you need to have someone who is authorized by the Canadian government to bring in a family, and they have those licenses. So the Mennonite Central Committee, the MCC, is our official sponsorship agreement holder. Winnipeg Friends of Israel also partnered with 2 sponsoring agencies, and the first one is the Mennonite is a Mennonite church in Morton, Manitoba, and Nafia will speak about them. And of course, Jewish Child and Family Service. Both the Mennonite Church and JCFS decided to get engaged and become official sponsors of families. So to sponsor a family, you need to have a sponsoring organization, and then you need to have what's called a sponsorship agreement. So by August of 2015, even though our goal was a modest goal of sponsoring two families, we were in fact able to raise enough money in partnership with JCFS and the MCC to raise enough money to sponsor 5 families. And so by then, WFI was able to process paperwork to bring 21 people to Canada. And I'll touch on this a little later on. From August until November, just recently, Winnipeg Friends of Israel and JCFS decided to reach out to the rest of the Winnipeg Jewish community. And the reason was simple. We were successful until then, and we thought that we wanted to do more, and we wanted to do it faster. And so we wanted to engage more agencies with the hope that we would raise more money and also maybe find sponsors that would be willing to take us a family and sponsor them. So we held a meeting back in October 2015. We had, I don't know, maybe 20 agencies, maybe an unprecedented meeting at GCFS. All of the Jewish agencies you can think of in the city were invited. Most of them came. And it's at that time that we created this coalition of agencies, Shaarey Zedek being one of them, and really Operation Ezra then became a community response to the refugee project. And just for your information, so you know who is involved today with Operation Ezra. JCFS obviously is the lead agency, and they're also the sponsor of the family, 4 families. So the Mennonite Central Committee, as I mentioned, is the sponsorship agreement holder. Shaarey Zedek is a sponsor, official sponsor of two families, which we'll talk about in a second. The Mennonite Church I mentioned is a sponsor of 1 family. Winnipeg Friends of Israel, as the founding agency, is involved. Manitoba Multi-Faith Council, the Yazidi community of Manitoba, the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg is also involved. Bridges for Peace and Calvary Temple, 2 Christian organizations, became involved very early on in the project. The Grey Academy of Jewish Education, Quint Sector Creative Living Center, the Brady JCC, National Council of Jewish Women, Temple Shalom, Herzliya, and It's Chaim. So it's now today a pretty large coalition of agencies. We have a much bigger network, and we're now working with each and every one of these organizations under the umbrella of Operation Ezra. So what used to be a grassroots project has now become a community-based project. I want to just give you a little bit of information on the families that we have sponsored to date, and then give you a bit of info on the 2 families that Shaarey Zedek has kindly offered to sponsor. Again, before engaging many agencies, we had raised enough money to sponsor 5 families, and these are the 5 families. The first one is the Hassan family, it's a family of 7 individuals. MCC is the sponsorship agreement holder, and the Mennonite Church in Morton, Manitoba is the official sponsor. That family's application has been approved, and we're awaiting interviews by Canadian representatives in Turkey. The families at the bottom, Sally Elias is an 18-year-old Iraqi national, Yazidi national, whose family is still in Iraq. He's now in a refugee camp. So he is family number 2. Family number 3 is the Nassau family, 6 kids and 2 parents. Family number 4 is the Bishar family, couple. And family number 5 is the Khalif family, a family of 3. The first 2, Sally Elias and the Nassau family, had their applications approved by CIC, by Citizenship and Immigration Canada. And they had interviews in Ankara on Monday and Wednesday this past week. And so now we're waiting for next steps. Not quite sure. It's quite a process. I'm not quite sure what the next step should be. But they've had applications have been approved, interviews were conducted, medical tests were done. What should happen next is essentially a decision made by the government to approve their sponsorship and maybe shortly send them to Winnipeg. So those are the 5 families, total of 21 different people, 21 people that we had sponsored up until October when we met with multiple agencies. The last slide is the slide that described 2 families that Shaarey Zedek kindly offered to sponsor. The Sally family is a family of 10. It's the largest family in our group. 8 kids ranging from I think 6 years old to 21 years old. And the Dakiel family is the youngest family out of the entire group with kids 3 and 5 years old. All of the families that we sponsored so far are all living in the same refugee camp in Turkey, a UN refugee camp in Turkey. They're all together. They all know that we're sponsoring all 7 families and all 35 people. And the applications for these 2 families have been submitted to CIC sometime, I think, middle of December. So in closing, just wanted to thank you for your time. The group of volunteers under Operation Ezra is obviously extremely happy to be working with Shaarey Zedek, and we're making ourselves available for whatever Shaarey Zedek needs in terms of support, be it administrative support or otherwise. I think that's it.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm now going to ask Nafia Nasa to come up. Nafia is really, I don't know, I was going to describe her as the soul behind this project. She is a young woman that came to Canada when she was 10 years old after having lived in a refugee camp for 6 years. Became involved 8 years, I apologize, 8 years in a refugee camp. The other day she told me a little bit about her life in the refugee camp, and I just find myself thinking often about how blessed we are to be in Canada. But Nafia has taken this on within her community, is providing a leadership role within the community. She has spoken widely in the community to a host of different organizations. And she's here this afternoon to tell you a little bit about her story, her experience, and later on in the afternoon, if you have questions, she'll be happy to answer them. So now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Anita. So, my name is Nafia Nasso. I'm the spokesperson for the Yazidi community of Manitoba. Okay, where to start? The journey for me, it began when I was 2 years old. My dad and my mom, my older brother, and myself lived in a tiny house in Hanasor Shingal in northern Iraq. My dad was forced to serve in the Iraqi military. After 2 gunshots, my dad, he was shot simply because he was Yazidi. After 2 shots, he managed to escape the army, and that same night that he escaped, we fled our home to Syria, Hasaka, Syria. It was about a 7-day journey. My parents hid us during the day, and they walked during the night. About halfway walking, my mother was faced with one of the hardest decisions of her life. a decision that hundreds of Yazidi women made on Mount Sinjar last year. A decision that no parents has to make. My mother almost left me behind because at the time when fleeing, she was 8 months pregnant. And my brother was 3 at the time, and she couldn't carry the 3 of us to the refugee camp. But just then, she spotted a donkey nearby, and that donkey saved my life. That donkey carried my brother and I to the refugee camp in Hasaka, Syria. When we got to the camp, along with hundreds of other Yazidis, we lived in a very small tent. And at the age of 4, my brother and I, along with hundreds of other Yazidi children, were forced to go to school for religious purposes. We were taught by Islamic extremists. We were beaten. We were tortured. And, we were told that we're devil worshippers. We don't deserve to live. And we were taught how to hate ourselves, how to hate our own people, and then how to hate everybody else in the world. And especially how we were taught so much hate against the Jews. We were taught that they lie about their history, that they kill innocent children, and they are just as a little bit worse than us. So that's how I spent my childhood. We were again forced to go for about 5-6 years, and I wasn't alone. There was hundreds of other Yazidi children. And then we would go to school and learn how to hate ourselves and everybody else in the world, and then go home and complain to our parents. We didn't really have a choice. Our parents didn't have a choice. We had to go or they would kill us. So therefore we went, and that was that. And then after school, we hid at home. We cleaned a lot. We're all experts at that. And that was it. That's how we spent our day. We all lived in camps, so around the camp it was all electric wired, so we couldn't leave the camp. Anybody who was sick or needed any kind of attention had to ask guards, the camp guards, and they were just as bad as our teachers. I know a lot of women that were pregnant. A lot died in the refugee camp because they needed medical assistance and the guards wouldn't let them out, or a lot of elderly, a lot of sick children died in that camp because the guards wouldn't leave them, let them out of the camp to go and get medical attention. And then in 1998, a UN office opened up in the refugee camp, and they invited all the Yazidis in that refugee camp, and they said that Australia, the United States, and Canada are accepting refugees. And of course, everybody was registered. This was in 1998. And then in 1999, luckily for my family and I, my parents were interviewed, and then they told us that there is a church in Morden, Manitoba, Pembina Fellowship. In Morden, Manitoba was interested in sponsoring a family, and that church saved our lives. That church sponsored us here. We arrived here in Winnipeg on March 11, 1999. And so we were in Winnipeg for about a week, and then we were picked up by people from the church. We went, and they very welcoming community. We lived in Morden for just over 2 years, and then my family and I decided to move back to Winnipeg because there was other Yazidis living in Winnipeg at the time, and the community wanted to be together, so we moved to Winnipeg. My parents live on Doncaster Street. They've been living there since 2002. And from 2002 to 2007, I think, believe it or not, none of me or my siblings, we did not cross the street between Doncaster and Tuxedo because of the Rady. We were told that it's fenced around for a reason, that it's owned by Jews, and there's cameras all around, and if you're not a Jew, you cannot cross that fence. So we didn't. I remember my younger sister and my brother, we knew it was a school, and this was after schools, 6, 7 o'clock. My younger siblings wanted to go and play at the park there, and we wouldn't dare cross the street. And then my parents have some medical problems, and the doctor kept telling them, you guys need to work out, and you need to do this, you need to do that, and so finally one of my mom's neighbors, she said to my mom, she said, well, the Rady's just across the street, it's walking distance, why don't you go there? And my mom said to her, well, we're not Jews, we can't go there. And she looked at my mom and she said, are you crazy? I'm not a Jew, I go there, anybody can go there. So of course my mom comes home and she yells at my dad. Of course. And so my dad said, okay, take one of your kids and go. He says, I'm not coming. So nobody volunteered, and then I said, okay, I'll come with you, but as long as the neighbor comes. And the neighbor said, no, she's not coming. She said to me, you take your mom and you go. So I said, okay. I was so scared. And my brother refused, my dad and my brother both refused to drive us there, so my mom and I walked there. It's about a 3-minute walk. So I walked in and I was shaking. I was so scared. I walked in and there's security. I said, okay. So I gave them my name and I told them why we were there, and very nice people at the desk at the time, and they very warm welcome. They took us to the desk where to get registered. I remember we met with Robin, and such nice people, very welcoming, and I thought, okay, this is crazy. And then I remember I told her, I said, we're not Jews. We, my mom lives across the street, and yeah, she said, it's for anybody can come, and I thought, okay. So we went, I filled out the paperwork and all that, and it was all good. And so we went home, and my mom yelled at my dad again. And she said, see, I got it all done. We've been living here all these years, and you know, like, I'm so sick and tired of people feeding us all this stuff, and so much hate, and so much this and that. And so anyways, we got it done, and my parents always say, like, it's the best thing that's happened to them since we came to Winnipeg, like going to the gym every day. And they have made a lot of friends there, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Yeah. So, did I miss anything? Daniel, you're one of my dad's best friends.
Oh, thank you. I did my best to. In the sauna.
Yeah, so it's been quite and it's just, and last year, when the Yazidis were under attack by ISIS, it was such a shock to me because I tried so hard to get attention from every community I can here in the city. And the Jewish community was the first community to step up and say, like, we're here to help. And like, I'm just so amazed and so thankful that I had this opportunity to meet so many wonderful people. And I've learned so much from the community. And I have to say, I beat up myself very hard for the longest time to think about everything that I was taught in the refugee camp and even here in Canada about the community. And again, I am so thankful, and thank you for each and every one of you for being involved in the sponsorship of Yazidis, and thank you for having me here and giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my story with all of you.
Thank you very much, Nafia. I had the opportunity in another incarnation to meet some of Nafia's community, unknowing what I was stepping into at the time, but very pleased now to be involved. What we'd like to do is show you a video that was brought to our attention by Bell that is a video produced by Father Dubois. Some of you may have heard him when he was here in Winnipeg about a year and a half ago, I think. And it gives you a bit of a sense of the reality of the Yazidis in the camps right now. Just looking, Robert, will it start? It's only a few minutes.
استبشرينا تيأس النصر قريب دولة الإسلام قامت وبدأ الذل
على مراكن على مسكين ومباجش ولا شيء وما بفضلين ومسلم
هر شب با صابون گرتن
galing-galing hata atas gunlan gabanan hata sarili na shauti din masabastaban kaya jadi kamera ko te harawosa harawan mabuti bu banasyo.
Thank you, Robert. I'd like to now ask Al Benarosh just to come up and tell you a little bit about the how we're organizing the finances and yeah, just a little bit about how we're doing, and then I'll talk about Shaarey Zedek.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I just want to touch on a few things, speak a little bit about how Jewish Child and Family got involved, primarily how most of the donations are flowing and how things will play out once families start to arrive. The rabbi spoke earlier about the Jewish response, and very interestingly, Nafia mentioned how nobody would step up, no communities would step forward until the Jewish community stepped up. And I think it speaks to the DNA of every Jew. When we talk about our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, we just read about Moses, and the word that resonates always is Hineni. Here I am. Whenever asked by God, where are you? Here I am, body, soul, to do what is necessary to be done to right this world and to steer the ship in the right direction. So for Jewish Child and Family Service, it was really a no-brainer. It began with a sponsorship of an Eritrean family that came to our attention, and then our board of directors, when approached by those involved with Winnipeg Friends of Israel, unanimously also decided we will take a forefront role in helping to organize it on a broader community effort. And I think we've accomplished that piece, but there's still so much work to be done. Initially, as Michelle mentioned, we coordinated a meeting of the organizations that are representative within our community, quite broadly. That happened in October. And because of the size of that group, obviously we needed a smaller core group to get the work done at an organizing level. So we struck up a working group that has representation. That working group, I just want to mention who they are. Michelle Aziza, of course, who's really doing a yeoman's work out in the community purely for voluntary purposes out of his desire and his passion. Bob Friedman brings his wealth of expertise and drive. Anita Neville, representing Shaarey Zedek. But honestly, Anita, we also talked about your links with Canadian government in that regard. Nafia, of course. Belle Jarnewski, who's been very, very active and involved, has written much. Probably within our Jewish community has the deepest understanding of Yazidi faith and the Yazidi religion. So thank you. Emily Shane, who's my predecessor at JCSS, who has a passion and an understanding for refugee and settlement work. Elaine Goldstein, Jewish Federation, and also from the Jewish Federation, primarily in a communications role, Shelley Fingtuck. And there have been other people that have stepped in as necessary. We are planning to have a meeting at some point in the very near future of the larger group to provide more updates. So Jewish Child and Family got involved very early on in this organizing capacity. Given our history as an agency in doing settlement work, going back formally over 50 years, 50, 60, 70 years almost, and we have a very vibrant, robust settlement department, as everybody knows. We've mostly been settling permanent residents through the Manitoba Nominee Program in our community. But we have over the years settled many, many refugees and helped our community. We go back to the 70s with the Vietnamese boat people, Bosnians, many, many Russian Jews, refuseniks from the Soviet Union as well. And we sit on many, many tables, both at a provincial level and in the settlement sector, around immigration and settlement work. So very, very logically an agency that should be involved. So I'm very proud to be part of that working group as well, as is our agency. Winnipeg Friends of Israel and Michelle had been doing their grassroots fundraising and had raised some funds working with Calvary Temple and some other places. We really wanted to provide incentive support by being able to provide tax receipts for donations. Now, I'm not saying that that's the primary reason people have been donating, but clearly it's something that we're able to offer. At that point, we had had discussions with Federation, who have now taken on the primary fundraising role, or at least the accepting of the funds. I've been told to plug that any donation over $20 will receive a tax receipt. Just was told to mention that. So the way the monies have been flowing or will be flowing is everything is initially flowed to Jewish Child and Family Service. We have set up separate accounts, separate accounting lines to be able to track the funds. Funds are being directed towards specifically the families that are being sponsored, because every family must have on their applications a specifically demonstrated amount of funds per person. So Michelle has those numbers very, very clearly. Manitoba has its specific requirement for amounts. Every province, based on cost of living, is different. It's roughly in Manitoba about $5,500 per person, and I just want to give you a sense of the scope. That $5,500 is what is supposed to be allocated to a single refugee individual for a 12-month period. I want you to think very closely whether you could physically live on your own for 1 year for $5,500. Not American dollars. So think about that. So really the requirement and the responsibility of sponsorship is far more than just the money involved. The constituent groups which support the refugees as they arrive really develop close relationships that are very much like family. We hear of stories of very close ties developing, and much like family, sometimes those ties clash. and it's part of the experience. So Jewish Child and Family Service really stepped in saying, yes, we will take that leadership role, but this has been an amazing community effort where we are going to be looking at volunteerism from the community, cash donations from the community. We'll be looking at gathering items for these families. We'll be looking at securing, in the context also of considering that close to 3,000 Syrian refugees will be arriving in Manitoba. We're going to have to secure housing. We're going to have to secure all of the other supports a family will require. The JCFS, with its many connections, will do that through the settlement sector. These are individuals are going to require family doctors and pediatricians and likely counseling supports and other things of that nature. But it all starts with funds and with money. So we will be the agency that will be definitely dispersing those funds as families arrive through the initiative. Federation will be accepting those funds. To date, Elaine, Federation has raised about $40,000. That was since launching this, the official campaign from Federation about 4 weeks ago now. Jewish Child and Family currently has close to $180,000 in the reserves for Operation Ezra, Some of that, in addition to that, I should say there's a $15,000 grant from the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba. We will be looking at hiring a dedicated staff person on a part-time basis. I don't know that we have any Kurdish-speaking Jews in Winnipeg. I mean, Moroccan Jews speak French and Spanish, so that's not going to work out too well. But we are going to look at hiring a Kurdish speaker to be able to work very directly with the families and be a key link for that. So the funds will flow from Federation. If the donations received today or in the future from Shaarey Zedek will flow through Federation, and they've developed a way of being able to track the specific Shaarey Zedek donations. They need to flow back to a beneficiary agency, is my understanding. So the funds that are raised specifically by Shaarey Zedek to sponsor the families that Shaarey Zedek has chosen to take it on will flow in that odd way to Federation, and from Federation to JCFS, and out to the families, likely through Shaarey Zedek. This is the way we have to work things. It will all get done. We're all figuring this out as we go along. I do have to say I'm very proud because I sit on national networks for Jewish family services in Canada. We're the only community in Canada whose Jewish family service and Federation and community as a whole has stepped up to do anything formally to support refugees of any kind in Canada. So we should give our community a big hand for that. I know there are some efforts in some other communities at grassroots levels, but they haven't taken on nearly the scope, and I think it speaks to our Winnipeg community. I don't want to take up too much time with other details. We'll be able to get a chance. We have lots of questions. We did want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers. If we don't have the answers today, we're definitely going to write the questions down and try to find answers as this project continues. As Michelle mentioned, to date we're looking at 7 families. You know, I think our community has the capacity to sponsor more than that, and they will arrive in standard stages as they go through the difficult government process for screening and for approval to arrive. So with that, I'm just going to say thank you for being here, for taking the time out today. It speaks to your desire to want to help.
Thank you, Al. I'm going to ask Lauren Louise to talk about Shaarey Zedek's efforts and how Shaarey Zedek is organizing. But I want to just pick up on one thing that Al alluded to, and I think Nafia did as well. The language of government, for the most part, speaks to the issue of the Syrian refugees, and in no way do we want to diminish that. But part of our challenge is to make government aware of the importance of the Yazidi refugees as well, and we are making baby steps in that direction. As Al mentioned, I'm fortunate that I've been able to contact some that I know, and I've had a conversation with the provincial minister of immigration, who is well aware and has met with a number of the people in this room on the efforts with the Yazidi, or to bring the Yazidi families here, and she is taking it upon herself to advocate on their behalf. So I would urge all of you here to use all of your connections, your writing power, whatever, to raise the issue of the Yazidis so that it becomes part of the national dialogue as well. So with that, I'm going to ask Lauren to talk about Shaarey Zedek and what we're doing specifically here.
Thank you, Anita, and I'm going to try not to repeat some of the wonderful words that you've heard before, but I probably will anyways. Just to recap, we have taken on the sponsorship of these 2 families totaling 14 individuals, and in order to do that, the government requires that we made a commitment, financial commitment for support for a year. Our commitment to these two families, support for a year, and as Al said, probably is not sufficient to get them through the year, but our commitment is for $90,000. And it's really important that that money is able to be available for them when they arrive so that they can try to be resettled into our community. Along with the money, you all have a form that you picked up or was on your chair when you got in, asking for two things, the money and your time and your expertise. One of the nice things and the great things about being part of Congregation Shaarey Zedek and the community as a whole is we have lots of people with lots of skill sets and experience that can assist to make this transition for these people much easier and much more successful. So I urge you to fill out the forms, and if you're able to make a donation. And there is people from the Federation here able to take your donations at the door. And I won't be offended if you get up while I'm speaking and walk outside to make a donation. I won't take it personally, believe me. So, so that's our initial move right now is fundraising. We have had a good response. We're not there yet, and every bit helps. And it's important that our community bands together for this effort. In addition to that, we will be looking for household goods, furniture, and to help the families get settled. Basically, when they come here as refugees, they basically get the same allowance on the airplane as you do when you go on a holiday. They get 20 kilos, one suitcase. And most of us who travel, particularly somebody in my family, when they travel, 20 kilos does not get them through a week. So you can imagine what it is to come to a strange country with basically the clothes on your back. So it's important that as part of that settlement process, we're able to find them housing and find them housing that's fully equipped. So once we have a list of volunteers that we have organized into these different silos of help that these folks are going to need, everything from transportation, helping them get through the system. We have a great partner with Jewish Child and Family Services, but it still comes down to individuals who are going to reach out to these families and become not only their suppliers, but their friends and their guides. So I know that we won't be disappointed, because I can already tell you we've had a strong outpouring of support from our members on an informal basis, and I'm sure we're going to continue. So I'm probably only going to say that before we go into a Q&A, there's probably two messages that we've heard here today. One of hope for a family that was able to escape an uncertain future, one that probably carried very, very dramatic consequences, and come to Canada and form and build a new life in a new environment. The other message was the video that we just saw. Families who aren't going to have that chance and face an uncertain future, face forced conversion, slavery, and a terrible death, unless we can reach out and help them. It's our job as Jews, who believe in Tikkun Olam, to help repair and mend the world. And this is a time for us to take that action. Thank you.
I'm sure that sitting here, you've got a number of questions. One thing that I want to reiterate, we're organizing and we're planning, but we're planning into the future, not knowing when anybody is going to come. As Michelle said, the applications have gone in. Our families, which we call 6 and 7, have not been interviewed yet, but some of the other families have been, and it could be 6 days, but unlikely, 6 weeks, or 6 months. And when we get word, we don't imagine we're going to get a lot of notice that they're coming. So it's going to be a very quick response needed. Anyhow, it is time for questions, and they'll try and answer, as Al said, and Lauren said, if we don't have the answers, we will try and get them for you, or we'll tell you what we know. We'll tell you what we know, which may not be enough, but we'll do our best. And this is very much a fluid endeavor. We're learning as we go and doing our best. So, are there questions, and who are they directed to? Paulette?
I would just like to know, how are these families chosen?
How are they chosen? Nafia has a list of families that she is in touch with, and we're basically going on her guidance on the families that she is in touch with in the camps. Some of the families, or one particular family, do you want to speak to the family that chose not to follow through because, not yet? Okay. She's in touch with the families. They're living in very difficult circumstances. Some families are making choices that we wish they would not make, but they are, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Can you hear me without the microphone? Just a comment on just sort of more globally, what a contributing factor to a successful settlement is. And one of them is having somebody here that you know, or having a community that you're coming to. So the fact that NAFIA has direct contact with some of these families, with all of the families, and that there are some interconnections, either relatives or friends here in Winnipeg within the existing Yazidi community, is very, very important on ensuring when these families arrive that there's a successful integration. So it's not to say if a Yazidi family reached out and didn't know anybody here to NAFIA, for example, that we'd say no, but the 7 families currently selected have some connections in Winnipeg. So think about when your ancestors arrived here 2-3 generations ago and they had a community to come to. So that's really some of the factors that are going in here. That's a lot of the work NAFIA has been doing, has been in direct contact with people in Turkey and in Iraq almost daily, not daily, with updates.
If I could add to that too, I'll get to it. From my past experience, I know that when assessing families to come into a community, the fact that there is a receiving community in that jurisdiction, it's always been a plus or a tick off in the form that adds to it. There's a question at the back.
Yes, first of all, congratulations to all of you.
Can you stand up?
Sorry, Ariel Carabelnico. Congratulations to all of you for this effort, for this success so far. My question is, the families are planned to come. Are they considered part of the 25,000 that the government promised to bring by a few days ago? Second, how we can do to really, if it is, it's even better. If not, how we can do to speed it up, because time is more than money here. Time is life. And if we don't bring them as soon as possible, they are exposed to all kinds of dangers. What we can do about this?
You're absolutely right. We haven't got a definitive answer that they're part of the 25,000 that the government has earmarked as coming, but we think that they would be. And that's what I spoke to earlier, is the importance of raising the issue of the Yazidis as a group ready to come. And we hope that they will be included. The government has also said that they will be going beyond their 25,000. And from my conversations, I think the government is aware of the Yazidis and will include them in the overall recruitment of refugees. Now, Arthur.
Is anything being done on an official way to deal with the fear of Jews?
Fear of Jews. The fear of Jews.
Good question, and you and I have talked about it before. At this point, no. Or do you want to speak to it, Lauren?
is there anything that we're doing in an organized way, Arthur, if I represent what you're saying, in an organized way to deal with the fear that has been ingrained in the Yazidi community about Jews and through the time that they were educated in the camps? And my response would be, and having lived in a community where in my youth I was a minority, and certainly we all are here, many of us are, the way that you overcome stereotypes and fear is through action. And I think the fact that our community has stepped forward to recognize the danger and the need to help the Yazidi community will speak more to those families than anything that we could do on a formal level. Nafia's family's experience, it's a small community. There are those in the community that will understand and believe, and there's those in that community, just like any other community, that will not. But I firmly believe that by action, we'll change the way they think. And frankly, whether they change their thought or not, they're human beings, they are in danger, and it's our job as Jews to do whatever we can to help them.
I mean, I can't really speak to has any formal thought been given, but I think there's been some loose thought given. I mean, I agree with Lauren. There's going to be the informal dialogues happening, probably starting right at Nafia, and with others in our community that are building bridges. The Yazidi community here, as my understanding is very loosely organized. I think Jewish communities have a very good foundation for understanding how to get organized. We have federations, we have federated communities, we have an infrastructure, we fund organizations, we have physical space. The Temple Shalom hosted, I believe it was with Winnipeg Friends of Israel, am I right, Yolanda? The dinner that happened over the summer, it sort of all came together. There was a Yazidi dinner hosted at Temple Shalom. And it was a great opportunity for people to dialogue and interface and interact. I've had thoughts about the Jewish community offering physical space to the Yazidi community in Winnipeg so that they can meet, so that they can worship, so that they can practice and get organized, and the expertise the Jewish community can offer in helping become more organized. So these are things that are, I call, the government talks about day one of settlement, let's get people here, and then the day two activities are things like that. How do we help people get more structured and organized and facilitate living in Canada? Let's get them to Canada first.
Go ahead, Mary. Yeah, go ahead.
I have two questions.
Want to stand up, please, so we can hear you.
I have two questions. One is about elderly people. There's that terrible film footage, news footage of people rushing to Mount Sinjar last year. And I remember seeing elderly people struggling over rocks, and it was a really heartbreaking thing. And I don't see elderly people come. Is there something that can be said about that?
Some elderly people are actually part of my families. I think it's family 5, where the father is myself. So the father, I believe, is 65 years old, and it, it's a, it's a somebody asked about the selection of families. It's a difficult decision that we've kind of left to nothing, just because we don't have to deal with it necessarily. There's been instances of families with sick members, and that we've had to discuss and say, well, because all those factors are considered by the government when applications of the processed. And so elderly has not been an issue. Again, older people, but the Canadian government, my understanding, is really focusing on young families and the kids. And from our perspective, we know that if we're able to bring young families, young children, much like Nafia's family, you look ahead 10, 15 years later, you have kids going to dental school, medical school, law school, educated, working, so on. So
There's also the opportunity for a family, once here, to sponsor additional family members, and that's part of the... Do you have one more quick question?
Yeah, it's about repayment of airfares. I understand that, is that an issue here? Or how's that going to operate?
We know that the Syrian refugees are not required to repay the airfares coming to Canada. We have not at
the expectation is that the refugees are thrown in by the government, and then there is a debt that's owed by the refugee to the government, and typically it's 12 months or beyond the 12-month period. There's a certain amount of time that's given to the family to pay it. I don't know if it's necessarily adhered to, but there is potentially an opportunity for us to apply for.
Yeah, there is an opportunity, and I guess we can call it humanitarian compassionate grounds, where an application could be made to have that waived. I just had leaned over to Michelle during the afternoon and mentioned that we have to make sure that we make that application on behalf of every single individual. And I think at the end of the day, whether that money gets repaid or not, I mean, if a family can't afford to repay it, the expectation is there. We have a large community. We're not talking there about hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's it's a one-way airfare from, in this case, will be from Turkey to Winnipeg. So we'll think about that as we move on.
Question over there. You're next.
I know you.
Do you want to stand up so everybody can hear?
There's an effort that's going to happen somewhat in the future, that future calendar is that I know. But if people have goods to donate, is there some thought given to the storage facility?
We are going to be in a position to accept goods hopefully within the next week that we can put away. We'll be looking for household goods, we'll be looking for furniture. What we're trying to find right now is the perfect storage solution, and that would be, and there's a room view here, that would be a facility that we could get 1,500 to 2,000 square feet of with its own doorway, so that because we're using volunteer help to collect the furniture and deliver it, we have to have the flexibility of access to the storage. So we're looking for something that's self-contained that we can have access to basically on a 24/7 type of arrangement. That would be the ideal. We do have a backup, and if we don't have the ideal by the end of the week, we'll use the backup. There is I think on the letter, do we have the contact information for okay, so if you filled out a form, when you came in a name form and your email address, we'll follow up and with an email to all of you telling you who you can contact and specifically what types of goods that we're looking for. I hope that answers your question.
Rabbi, you have a question.
I just want to add to that in terms of incentive. We are able, whether it's, I would suspect through Jewish Child and Family Service might be the most logical way to do it. We can offer tax receipts for the market value for that space. There is a step involved in an actual exchange of checks, but we can offer a tax receipt for that for somebody who is wanting to donate the space and come to the forefront that way. I think Nafia's garage is getting a little bit full at this point. We have to start getting some things out of it.
It's very gratifying that Winnipeg has banded together the way it has to bring in these 7 families, but I'm overwhelmed by the number of people who need help. And I was disappointed to hear that we're the only community in Canada that's stepped forward in this way. So I'm wondering if there's a possibility of enlisting maybe a national Jewish effort on behalf of the Yazidis, because we're facing a similar kind of problem.
I can't speak for UIA. I don't think Elaine could either in that regard. It has been raised, the refugee issue in general has been raised at the national level. Again, I can't speak for the national community. I can't. All I can speak to is the amazing thing that's happening in our community. It speaks to the charitable nature of our community. It speaks to the tzedakah nature of our community, to the social justice soul of our community, and we take care of our own home, and we hope that we be an example to the rest of the community. I know the national level at Jewish Family Services, they are involved, certain communities by nature of how those provinces are set up around absorption of refugees and of immigrants are doing varying degrees. I know Ottawa has a very significant effort happening right now, grassroots, and they're very closely working with the former Winnipegger, no less, Mira Sukarov, is very, very actively involved. They're very closely involved with the Jewish Family Service in Ottawa, who have been settling refugees from that part of the world for many, many years. Toronto, JIAS Toronto, Jewish Immigrant Aid Services of Toronto, is a sponsorship agreement holder, and they've been working very intensively in the Toronto community to help settle refugees as well. We're the only community really working at the plight of Yazidi refugees.
I just had a question about translation services. Translation services, and it's kind of a multi-stage question. So do most of the Yazidi families in Winnipeg already, and the ones who are coming, speak Kurdish? Is that the primary language? And
want to repeat your question?
Is Kurdish the primary language?
Yes.
It is, okay. So have you thought about translation services? There is a Kurdish community in Winnipeg, not Yazidi. So I'm just wondering if you've thought about that, because there's professionals in the community that could offer services and help to families, and translation services are an important piece in that, important step in that piece.
Yeah, and I'm working on that through the Yazidi community, and we should be okay for translators
okay.
in the Yazidi community, just because it will make it a lot easier.
So existing people that are already here
Yes.
can speak English and Kurdish. Okay.
Thank you. Just another quick comment. Sorry. The government's focus is on Syrian nationals, and Yazidis are Iraqi nationals. So like Anita said earlier, that's why it's very important for each and every one of us to write to our MPs and to make sure that Yazidis are included in the 25,000 or 50,000.
I also want to touch on just to raise some sensitivity around the types of issues the Yazidi community even here would face, and that is a Kurdish-speaking Kurd might not necessarily, and there's an organized Kurdish community in Winnipeg, may not necessarily be the best match for a Yazidi-speaking Kurd. There's all sorts of interesting nuances that we have to be sensitive about a long history of persecution and racism that is very systemic in those communities that, face it, will also hopefully be broken in the future, but we have to be very sensitized to that. So just because we have a Kurdish-speaking person, to pair them with a Yazidi-speaking person might not, could be very re-traumatizing and could bring many nuances. So we've actually had Nafia connect with Welcome Place here in Winnipeg, who is the agency that does government-assisted refugee placement, around providing or linking Kurdish translation as Yazidis arrive through there, because we did have one government-sponsored family arrive about a month ago, Yazidi family, and to offer that Kurdish translation. But we do have that the Yazidi community that has Kurdish capability to translate.
Would you explain what happens, what are the steps that happen when a family with children arrive on Monday? Do the children start school the next week? Do the parents learn English? How does all this play out?
So I'm going to put on the lens of when a permanent resident arrives, because much of it is very similar. Families initially have to get oriented. You know, they're in a new country. We will meet them at the airport. Someone from the initiative close and connected to that family will meet them. We'll get them settled initially. So we'll try to find them either temporary housing and then move them, try to get them moved into more permanent housing. We'll get all of their documentation set up. They're going to need Manitoba health cards. They're going to need social insurance numbers. All of these various things. Families will become eligible for the child tax benefit and all these other things that we all avail ourselves of. We will try to ensure that children are in school as quickly as possible. And of course, school of choice. We'd like to keep families within neighborhoods where they're in close proximity to each other. We'll have to see what the housing market looks like as that happens. And yeah, we'll try to get things settled very, very quickly, because the quicker childcare needs can get met with a family, then the quicker the parents have the flexibility to be able to get out and do the things that parents need to do in order to establish some semblance of routine in family life. That will involve English language classes. They're going to need medical attention. As families start to arrive and all of a sudden there's a sense of, well, now I'm safe, many, many sort of traumatic experiences can start to percolate to the surface. I know we have a few mental health professionals in the room, and they could speak to how that plays out. And that's where the 1 year is really, really important, to the extent that we can help link families to social activities, to the extent we can link families and adults to employment supportive services when they're capable, and start to get families on the business of living life the way it should have been lived from the beginning.
May I add a little bit of information to that question? When refugees first settled in Winnipeg, the adults were in national service for 5 weeks, and they're given an orientation basically to do some of the things that you mentioned, how to go to the doctor, how to buy groceries, etc. The children really needs. It's an organization where they spend 8 to 10 weeks, and they learn basically how to survive in a classroom, how to line up, how to raise their hand, how to hold a pencil, the alphabet, things like that, and then they're fed into the school based on wherever it is that they settle.
Did you fill out the volunteer form? Thank you. Yeah, of course, as an agency, Jewish Child and Family Service and our community, we don't try to duplicate the service that's happening, the services that are happening out in the city of Winnipeg. We will immediately connect families as they arrive to all of the services that your name, Wendy, that Wendy just spoke about, and get all of those government-funded orientations happening.
Okay, we've got a couple more. There's one at the back, and then I'll come to you, Louise, and then to Lauren. And we'll stay around afterwards as well. Go ahead.
Am I the one at the back?
Sure.
Someone else? So I congratulate you, and I fully support everything you're doing, but I think the rabbi's question is very important. We've glossed over it too quickly. I mean, what we're doing here will just be a drop in the bucket. And it's hard for me to understand that there's no one from the Jewish community in Winnipeg that has a voice in the national Jewish community. And if we do, I don't understand. I mean, this has to be a national Jewish project. It's too important to just be a Winnipeg project.
I hope I don't put any of our Federation people on the spot. Do you want to make a comment, Louise?
Bob. Can I respond to that? I think there's a little misleading information about that. There is a grassroots undertaking in different cities. I got a call maybe 2 months ago from a young woman in Toronto who said, could you help us? Because we heard Winnipeg's doing something, and in Toronto we've gone to synagogues, we've gone to leadership, and they've said not interested. However, having said that, there's a private foundation in Toronto. I know this because the CEO called me maybe a week or two later, who happens, the foundation actually is supported by Jewish folks in Toronto who've committed to raise enough money to sponsor 100 families, Yazidis, okay? So even though the organized community, whether it's the Federation, CIJA, or whatever, we've spoken to CIJA, I know Elaine's spoken to CIJA, I've spoken to CIJA, they're not interested. I'm not sure what they're interested in, but that's a different story. However, Foundation Toronto, 100 families, $3 million. They've committed to raise $3 million, and they will. So things are happening. I did a little piece on the CIJA blog a couple of weeks ago, urging not just the money part, but as Anita said and others have said, communicating with our elected officials. And that's really, really critical. I think the message has gotten across at the Liberal caucus, that's great, but the more we communicate with our elected officials to make sure that they understand that even though they were Iraqi nationals, they should be included in the 25 or 50,000. So awareness as well as fundraising is important across the country, so it's happening, but maybe not through the Federation, except for
Yeah, Elaine, as our CEO of our federation, I don't know if you want to add.
Well, I think Bob's probably said whatever. I know I've been contacted by somebody in Toronto that Yolanda has put to me. We haven't been able to connect it. There's some people in Toronto also.
I think, David, as
Probably the same organization, they're trying to raise money and they're willing to, sorry? No, not project. I can't remember the name of the foundation, but the CEO is Jeffrey.
Yes.
And he actually wants our federation to speak with the federation in Toronto to encourage them to get involved as well, because this way they will be more successful. So
I think, David, as we meet with success and we need the families to come, that our story will be told and we can build upon it. There were a couple of other hands. Louise, you had your hand up, and then I know Eddie had his hand up, and Lauren had his hand up. Louise, go ahead.
My question
Stand up, please.
People coming to Canada, when I returned to Canada, I had a 3-month wait before I could go on management health. What kind of medical coverage and available medical services will these people provide?
So individuals arriving currently as permanent residents or as refugees, once they've received that approval of refugee status here, they are considered landed immigrants. They're eligible immediately for everything. Everything that you or I or any other Canadian can avail themselves of in terms of all those services, government-supported services.
I think we'll take Eddie and then Lauren, and then we'll stay around to answer individual questions. Yeah, but before anybody leaves, before I ask Eddie to give his question, I just want to reiterate the support that we've had from the staff of the Shaarey Zedek. Ian, Robert, the cantor is here, videotaping this event. We could not have made this happen without a real effort, and we certainly appreciate it.
I was just wondering, maybe I misunderstood some of the comments, but you were talking about having the government include the Yazidi within the 25,000. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to request that they have the Yazidi additionally to the 25,000 or 50,000? We don't want to see a competition between the groups or any of the Syrians left out. So wouldn't the answer be to include this as a separate but related issue to increase the overall number of refugees rather than cut back on, the Syrians?
Your point is a valid one, Eddie. I think the issue right now is simply to get them here. And I think as we contact our members of parliament, and I know that a group here has met with 1 or 2 of the elected members and with the have something set up with the Manitoba Liberal Caucus that they will reinforce what you said, and I urge you to follow up with those that you know and write and speak to that as well. But you're right, the more people we can get, the better it is.
El gato y la leche.
It's a moving target. I can tell you that our commitment is $90,000. We're part of an overall community structure. Our money is being identified as the money that we are contributing. We're frankly commingling our contributions so that our community can bring in more families than the 7 that we've committed for at this point. So I can tell you, Lauren, that response has been good. We are not at our goal yet. But being always a salesman, I'm very optimistic that we are going to reach that goal. I cannot believe, knowing our congregation, our community, I cannot accept that we won't meet the goal and go over it. And hopefully, we'll be meeting again with our congregation, our community, saying, guess what? It's not 7, now it's 9. We need more volunteers. But I think we'll be okay. Not to say there's somebody out there right now who's going to give you receipts, so don't feel that your contribution isn't going to be needed or appreciated. I've got the course, I don't have to do it again. Just before we end the questions and we go on to just a sort of meet and greet, if you have some specific questions that you want to ask, I want to remind you that there was really 3 purposes to the meeting. 1 was informational, 2 was to solicit funds, and 3rd, and most important, is to get people who are prepared to volunteer with your time and your skill set to make this a very, very successful rescue. And the only way we can, starting point is, please fill out those forms. If you don't have a form, there are more outside the door, but please, before you leave, fill out the forms if you can help it anyway.
Can I ask that, Lauren, that the forms can be dropped off here at the front desk, just leave, we'll get back to you, we just need the information.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to say thank you all for coming. You'll hear from us again. There is an email address somewhere. It's on the form that you can write with. Again, thank you all for coming.